Now, so I'm going to start out today. I'm going to talk about affect control theory as a qualitative analysis schema. This is something that people have been asking me about for a while. So I got together with Kathryn because people have been asking her about it too, given on some of the things she's written about with Dave. And we are trying to come up with something of a model here. And I'm hoping, given qualitative stuff, this is all going to fit in 15 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast. Okay, now this is stuff that's been covered before. I'm not going to spend in this conference. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. We've got our two schools of symbolic interaction, kind of processual with Bloomer and Goffman, and the structural form, which is really encapsulated in the work by Stryker and Heiss. And the issue that we talk about here in ACT when we're talking about the qualitative work is that these are complementary, not exclusive models. And with this kind of qualitative application, we have the potential for bringing these two schools together. Historically, we've seen that the processual SI people have kind of tended to ignore our structural stuff. In fact, Dave has always complained how difficult it is to get affect control theory, for instance, published in the Journal of Symbolic Interaction. But over the past 20 years or so, scholars have been ACT scholars have been increasingly applying this kind of formal theoretical insights of the theory to better understand qualitative and also survey results. The result has been the development of a very powerful coding tool for interaction. This is not a coding scheme in a traditional qualitative sense. I don't know how many people here have done qualitative work where you have a coding scheme. It's literally almost a list of codes, the organization of the codes in your study. This is more of a schema. It's a way of approaching and organizing your whole analysis more generally. So when we use ACT in qualitative research, we can look at it in a couple of ways. Over time, we've seen two strands develop how ACT has worked in qualitative research. Now, the first strand, the first one that developed, was really looking at modeling interaction and emotion change, looking at emotion management in various situations, how people resolve deflections, how people make sense of what's going on. And we have a nice long list here, and this is just a partial listing. I'm sure you can think of others as well, of people who've done work along this line. In fact, a lot of this list, you can see, this is not all just qualitative research. We have some of the work that Kathryn and Dave have done, which basically is a complementary work, mutually confirming qualitative, quantitative, and simulation studies, saying, yes, we found something exploratory through qualitative work. Hey, let's step back, let's simulate this. Hey, look at this, it actually does indeed work. So, we're talking about modeling interaction and emotion change. There's a general procedure that people have tended to use. If you look back at these various studies, most people usually start out by identifying the deflecting event observed, regardless of what that event is. It could be divorce or bereavement, loss of a loved one. It can be a sexual assault, as in Kate Boylan's and McKinsey's study. Kate Boyle's and McKinsey's study. I'm getting your first and last name confused, conglomerated there. But whatever the event is, you're kind of starting with that event that's causing a deflection with established self-sentiments. Quite often in qualitative research, you're taking an event that really can't be modified either. It's not like you can go back in time and take it back, and you can't change the event itself. There are things that are somehow intransigent. Then once you have that event, you look at it and look at the data and see, you can find the actors, the behaviors, and the objects. Make your ABOs within that event. Assess each ABO on EPA dimensions and get your initial impression as to what's actually occurring, the impression that's occurring in that data. And then the job is to say what changes occurred in the ABOs to resolve the deflection. And you can do this either prospectively, such as in ethnography, where you're watching how people are moving forward to change events, to change definitions. Or if you're doing something like an interview study or a historical study, you can do it retrospectively and essentially work backwards to what the initial deflection was in order to get to the point of how does the current definition resolve that deflection.
Like Celeste's.
Well, yes, but I'm actually going to use her in the second strand. Like Boyle McKenzie, exactly. Now, I'm going to give you an example of how this works, and I'm using my own data just because it's convenient and I know what I'm talking about. This was my study from 2015, which is hopefully going to be actually public, coming out or under review soon. Bereaved cancer caregivers making sense of the death of a loved one. Here's a quote, and it was just so fast. I mean, it was just a few days, and she went. I think it was just her. She didn't want to stay around. She was not staying around to burden anybody. This is a caregiver talking about a patient. Another one. Sometimes I get mad at him for leaving when he did. He had to have it his way. That's why he went to hospice. I didn't want him to go. He didn't want to die at home. Like I said, there were people in and out, in and out, in and out, and he waited until he was alone, you know. It was just him. He was still calling the shots. So these are two caregivers talking about the death of a patient from cancer. Now notice what's happening here is both of them are changing the death into a different act. And you can make that change into essentially an ABO impression hypothesis. So for the first one, we can kind of see that patient doesn't die on the caregiver, patient unburdens the caregiver, makes the patient active, gives them some control, some power, and makes them good. The other one, essentially got the patient spurns the caregiver, right? Very different resolution. In both cases, you've got a case where the caregivers have redefined the act of dying to confirm with their sentiments about the deceased. So we see a process by which emotion change has occurred, and you can model that using the EPA dimensions. Now, the other variety, or the other strand of qualitative analysis in ACT is kind of an emerging one. And I'm actually drawing on the Schuster and Campos Castillo piece from yesterday, where they're applying the EPA dimensions to fill gaps or build theory. But they were looking at this 1980 ERA campaign. Rather than just modeling emotion management or how situations were resolved, they actually filled in information that we didn't have data on. They didn't have any data. That data was never recorded. That data was lost. It was missing data. We were able to use ACT in and applying it to qualitative data to actually extract results that are possible to obtain any other way. Now, the example I'm going to use is the one where Kathryn and I are analyzing data that I collected working with Jesse over here on Alzheimer's patients, looking at the persistence of self in elders with Alzheimer's disease. And so what we were doing was collecting identity data from people who were losing their cognitive capacity. So literally, they're losing their awareness of their identities. Okay? So we're trying to collect data that's kind of not there. And I'm going to take and give you a quote out of this, and we're going to walk through it, and I'm going to show you how this works. This is Daryl, who says, I worked in many different places because I just loved the job, you know. I'd do it so much that when I got to the top, then I'd move over and get the job here and get the job there. See, my wife died before that, 6 years ago, so I was all alone. So I still have a big home that I own, but I stay here and work here all the time with the people, and I'm pleased with it. I got to the place where I started here, was nice to the people. That's what I said. I really enjoy it. Even now, with the people, with the girls and stuff like that. Just talk to them all about, nothing. Tell them what they have to do. And you have to stand up to their standards and have no trouble. The interviewer says, so have you been here for 6 years then, since your wife died? Errol says, no, I've only been here 8 months because I was working with some boats and I didn't like that. So anyways, I came here just for rest. I was going by and I stepped in here or out there. I was looking around like this and a man came out and said, could he help me? I said, no, just looking around. He said, do you want a job? Oh, yeah. I said, okay. I said, yeah, I'll take the job. So he came in, 15 minutes he came out and he said, you got the job. I said, what? Geez, I don't even know where I am. I just wanted to see what it looked like. Interviewer, what is your job here? Daryl, I look after all the girls. Now, to put this in context, this man we're talking to is a resident of the nursing home, right? But he does not see himself as a resident. He actually firmly believes he's an employee, excuse me. And you can see how he talks about work so much. A job, do the job. I move, get to the top, work here. I started working here. His explanation for why he's here is all about him having a job. This is all part of his persistent identity. So we can see really, literally, his job here is employee. As you look and you say, what's he doing? His job apparently is to taking care of all the girls. Okay. So employee takes care of the girls. I mean, this kind of, if you look, it's kind of your working hypothesis. Throughout the data, we can see later, he starts talking about, oh, he's a great breadwinner, he bankrolls the family, talks about how much money he makes. You can see that kind of echoed here, that I still have a big home, this kind of stuff. So all these, you can kind of maybe say a breadwinner is part of his identity or provider. From this, you can get working hypotheses about what his self-sentiments are. Okay? Get a sense of who he feels like he is. What's important about this, of course, is that his identities have really become disconnected from the situation. He has very little interactional support for this. Now, people aren't acting towards him as though he's an employee. They're acting towards him as though he's a resident in a nursing home with advanced Alzheimer's. So his sentiments are more important here for guiding his behavior than his cognitive understanding of what's going on. So emergent from our data analysis is this notion that selves, specifically self-sentiments, persist even after the identities that were their basis have begun to fade from their awareness. These findings of persistent self-sentiments support Neil's 2015 book and the work that he and Jesse have been working on that they presented in the Identity Conference in October, looking at what Jesse just talked about, this whole idea of connotative and denotative aspects of self, where in Alzheimer's, that piece is becoming disconnected. So, implications for this. Implications for the first strand, the more long-standing strand, that I'm not saying that's going away. That's still doing important work. What that really shows is ACT's utility as a unifying methodological approach. I mean, literally, we're using the same theory to approach things through mathematical simulation, through survey, through ethnography, through qualitative interviews, through historical document analysis, a whole variety of ways. And then we're able to confirm one another's results using different methods. So that's a huge benefit both for ACT and for the field in general. Secondly, with our second strand, ACT has become a data generating tool, essentially a means of potentially identifying theoretical gaps, dealing with missing data that are lost or ambiguous, or in some cases never collected in the first place. And I love this quote from Lively and Heiss. Says the relations between identity, impression, and emotion allow any one of these to be inferred given the other two. I think that very much sums up the approach to using ACT in qualitative data and shows how applying EPA dimensions for ABO events really allows us to compare apples to apples in unstructured data and gives us a theory-driven schema for dissecting social actions.